Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David, how are you doing today?
It's a good day. It's just another day where I'm not as quite as slick as Dick Irvin in terms of my broadcast quality here, but I'm hanging in there. I'm doing my best, man. What can I say?
Mm-hmm.
Dick Irvin, I was always amazed by him, like just the fluidity of his speech and his just ability to get things out and just keep talking in such a nice, eloquent manner. He set the standard, I think, for broadcasters. And I once had the pleasure of interviewing Dick Irvin about his father and
I
about
was going to say, Dick Irvin Jr. you interviewed.
Statistical information, because his father with Irwin, I think it's Irwin Roth, came up with plus minus. NHL plus minus, the beginning, the beginning of advanced stats was Dick Irvin Sr., who was Montreal coach and GM in the 40s. Bruce, today we're going to talk about, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about Jesse Puljujärvi, the latest with him out of Finland. We're going to talk about NHL.com's projection of the Oilers lines. We're going to talk about Canadian division and where the Oilers might finish, and what some experts think about that, and what you, Bruce McCurdy, thinks about that, and I, David Staples, think about that.
What I think about those experts?
Exactly. The experts. It's been a bad year for experts, Bruce.
Yes.
We're going to talk.
It's been a bad year for everyone.
It's been a bad year for everyone. We're going to talk about the Oilers, not the Oilers, the NHL's return to play. And the latest on that from Pierre Lebrun that I saw is they're talking now about mid-January, 52 to 56 game schedule. And of course, all contingent on the players and the owners hammering out a financial agreement. And as far as I can understand, Bruce, it seems like they have this 50-50 agreement on the revenue for the NHL. And that's kind of not negotiable.
Right.
That's the thing that's not negotiable. The question is, the Oilers, there was a kind of a side agreement from the 50-50 saying you'll actually get, works out to about 70% of their normal salaries this year. The rest of it will be deferred. And that's because they're going to have a lot less revenue this year.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whatever the revenue was, the initial agreement was you're going to get 70% of it. And now the owners are saying, actually, the revenue is going to be so damn low that we actually want you to take only about 50%. Is that right? 50% of your,
something in that range.
50% of your wages and defer the rest. And this isn't going over too well with the players who want that 70% of their money now. They don't want to defer. The only thing I would say is the players, it's up to them to figure this out. And if they don't figure this out, obviously a pox on both houses. They could just bury the NHL under a mountain of BS if they want to, because they're killing their league if they don't play this year. So if that's what they do, then to hell with them. They'll be held to pay from fans. Brian Burke's talked about American teams going under. That's going to definitely happen. They're already losing a ton of interest. The interest in the NHL is at an all-time. Like, people have just tuned out. There's a hardcore group of people like us still talking about it, but it's not on anyone's minds right now, and they're going to lose a lot of fans. So the whole deferral thing, to get back to that, is if they defer the money, if they take the money, all the money now, 70% of the money, if they take more money now, that means down the road, there's going to be salary cap implications. The salary cap will be lower. So essentially you're taking away from future payments to players to get the money now. And this may sound like whatever, but if I was a 18-year-old superstar heading in the NHL, I'd be a little bit worried about this, because what this means is the salary cap, if they take all the money now, that means they're going to have a bigger bill to pay later. And that will come out of the pockets of players who are not in the NHL right now. So this is pitting current NHL players against future NHL players who do not have a vote.
Yeah.
in
Guess which
do they
ones have the
not?
votes? Yeah.
Guess which ones have the votes?
Hmm.
So, and I can see people wanting money now rather than money in the future. Money now is worth more than money in the future, and probably. So why wouldn't with inflation? You know, if inflation goes up, we'll see about that. So I can see why the players want the money now. I can see why the owners don't want to pay the money now, and I don't give a hoot about any of it. If you can't figure it out, to hell with you. So that's my take. What's yours?
Yeah, well, the players are upset, and I'd say understandably so, in that they negotiated this agreement, this memorandum of understanding on the new CBA 5 months ago in July. And at that point, they agreed to this 20% plus 10%. It amounts to a
They did. They
28%
did.
um, clawback of the players' salaries. Now, my understanding, which is far from perfect, though, let's start there. But my understanding is that there was no pro rata element to it. That if they played a shorter season, the players would get a proportionately lower amount of their salary. So if they play a 56 game season, well, that's 70% of the season. So if they get 70% of their pay, uh, that's it's a clawback from their salaries, but I mean, from the revenue side of things, I mean, the revenues are going to go in the tank. There's no two ways about it. Fans or many fans for much or most, if not all, of the season. Uh, I would make the case. I'm not entirely convinced the owners bargained in good faith, frankly, in the summer when because they really wanted to get back and play the playoff games, which satisfied some of their TV commitments and ensured some revenues would come in. Um, but anybody who couldn't see the writing on the wall that many of the health experts were talking about the second wave being worse than the first, and how this fall and winter could be a tough one, and so on. And and yet there wasn't many safeguards or guardrails. I think it's the common uh, vernacular these days. Uh, Against that, now they're trying to sort of take a step back and review it, and it does need to be done, but it smacks of just poorly prepared or negotiated initial position, frankly. Uh, and the players are in uh, you know, they're in a tough spot. The owners are in a tough spot, but it's in both of their interests. They got to work it out. I mean, if they were to impose a work stoppage on top of the natural work stoppage that the pandemic has applied, uh, it would be a death blow. I just don't understand how the hockey would survive anywhere close to its current form. And Brian Burke was saying that don't worry about Canada. Canada will bounce back and be ready to consume hockey whenever in whatever form. But this big continental market that they've developed is I mean, it's on shaky ground already. Some of these cities they play in, where they don't. To me, the boundary is where ice forms naturally. That's hockey country, and where it doesn't, it's sort of, it's artificial ice, and in a way, there's an artificial game there. Those markets are in big trouble. I mean, they've always been, difficult sells, but they're in big trouble now. So they have to work it out, and as you say, a lot of it's just a battle, internal battle within the players. Uh, where how do they split their 50% among themselves? And in this case, it has a long-term implications over the 6 or 7 years of the CBA before the accounts get settled. Well, that's an awful long time. I mean, that's more than a full career for a seller. So the ones who are around now, obviously, they want to put off as much of that as they can. But uh, they're they're in a difficult spot. I'm just going to quote a little bit from a column I read on Boston Hockey Now by Jimmy Murphy, I think the guy's name is, and he winds up that says uh, one NHL player told him Friday morning the players are trying to treat this like they do when an opponent takes a run at them on the ice, trying to goad them into a retaliatory penalty. Players know the owners are taking advantage of them in the pandemic right now, but they know they can't afford to miss an entire season. And this is a quote from the agent. Take a number and get them when the time is right. The players know they've been cornered again, and will have to accelerate that money they owe and maybe even pay more when all is said and done. Because let's face it, this 50-50 revenue share is bullshit. It's working more in the owner's favor. That being said, the feeling I get talking to my guys and other agents is that now is not the time to finally take that stand. Everyone involved needs a season, and the players want to give the fans a season with everything that's going on in this world.
I don't care. I don't know what the players are thinking, and like whatever hockey analogy they're using, like it doesn't matter to me. Bruce Burke has also said the Oilers have the right to cancel the season, a legal right,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and whether they do or not, they could
Yep.
cancel the season, right? Like, and
Yeah.
then it'll go to the courts and they'll work it out over years, right? But the owners can still cancel the season right now, whether they're right or wrong. It seems to me
Yeah.
they can do that. So this is a
Yes.
big stick, and
Yes.
um,
It's called a force majeure, is the
that's
legal
right.
term.
And you can. I would say that what you're saying has some sense. Like they
Mm-hmm.
certainly did have a deal, and it seemed like the
Yeah.
players had some certainty. At
Yeah.
the same time, was it bad faith to not? Did they think that did people know where COVID would be? I would say there was a lot of uncertainty. That's for darn sure. We had those huge projections. Remember initially huge projections of spread and deaths initial from Oxford and London that turned out to be incorrect. That was some of the smartest people in the world trying to figure out what's going to happen to COVID, and they were completely and utterly wrong. So to know what was going to happen with COVID this fall, a little bit iffy to know that. So maybe the owners were incorrect to make a deal based on the fact that they didn't know, and maybe they did that to get the players into the playoffs. So
Yeah.
that's a fair comment. That's definitely a fair comment. Um, on the other hand, uh, no one no one did know where COVID was going to
No,
go.
of
We're
course
in
not.
this terrible situation, and it just strikes me the players are in this situation where there's a little bit of denying of reality. There's
Mm-hmm.
this huge hit to their industry. Their industry isn't what it
Oh yeah.
was. It's the revenues. If you're going to play without fans in the stands, your revenues, like some
Right.
people have said, they're going to be hardly cut at all. But my understanding was like in the past, the revenues were 80%, and now they're I think closer to 50%. The gate revenues are about
Mm-hmm.
50% of the revenues, if I'm not mistaken. You're losing that. That's half the money. And,
Mm-hmm.
and it's at least half the money because then there's other things that are probably going to go by the waysides in terms of sales and advertising of sales of paraphernalia and
Yep.
advertising from inside the building and other things like that. I don't really know, but the fundamental economics of the industry have been changed, and you're just gonna have
Yeah.
it's obviously hugely painful for
Yes.
everyone who has to take a salary cut. Lots of people are doing that, and lots of people are out of work
Mm-hmm.
and fearing losing work. So again, the bottom line is just deal with it, figure it out, and if you can get something going, make it happen. You're going to have a hard enough time getting something going with COVID around, as the leagues in Finland and Sweden and Switzerland are seeing. You're going
Yep.
to have a hard enough time just running this thing and making it happen. And
Mm-hmm.
other people can't even play hockey. We'd love to get out there. Like many people would love to get out there and play hockey. If you can go out there and play hockey, get out there and play hockey. And whatever revenue you have something actually that's pretty special. I think in the end, this 50-50 agreement, it was hard to get to. It took a lot of pain and suffering, but I think it is the basis for a healthy NHL to go forward. If they can just hold on to that 50-50, try to be fair to everybody here. And this goes for the owners as well. Try to be fair to the players try to be fair to your own families and your own situation, and also future players. Think about them
Mm-hmm.
and get on with it.
Well, the players splitting their own share of the pot. I mean, we used to at least see this on an annual basis when they voted on this escalator clause on the salary cap.
Yeah.
And basically, that they were splitting their share of the pot, but it basically, again, as I understand it, it boiled down to that group of players that had guaranteed future contracts not wanting the escalator, and that group of players that didn't have contracts in the future that are going to be hitting the open market wanting the escalator for the teams to have more salary caps so they could sign more guys. And of course, the higher the salary cap, the more the escrow. And I'm not fully sure that the majority of players understand escrow to its full meaning, but that's another issue. But they would always have this split vote because there would be competing interests of how they shared their part of the pie. Really, in a sense, the owners had nothing to do with that part of the argument. On the flip side, the owners get the 50% of hockey-related revenue, or at least they're supposed to in the long run. But they also have this other factor of franchise values, the Forbes values of the teams going up and up and up and up and up. That's totally unrelated to the hockey-related revenue that these guys, I mean, Daryl Cates, what's he seen? The value of the Oilers double or more in the time that he's had the team. And they don't want to kill the goose that laid that golden egg. And so to have a full on work stoppage, that would be devastating to the industry. So I really think there's strong pressure on both sides. As distasteful as it is, they got to work something out.
You're right, Bruce, and that's the stick. If there's any kind of stick that the players have, it would be that. But I think for the owners, there's been consistent rumors of about 6 owners wanting just to cancel the season because they're going to lose more money by playing the season than by not having it. Is the rumor? Who knows? Like, and it's kind of in a time of war. Don't believe anything, right? Like when two sides are squabbling over money, be careful about that. But yeah, I think that is something that the players have. That the owners would be worried about their franchise values decreasing, but I think that's overridden by probably a lot of these owners are, I'm guessing, are in terrible financial trouble right now. Just like, a certain percentage of the population, depending on what your business is. So they'd be happy just to ditch the season, some of them, and not lose that money because they can't afford it. They can't afford that money. Like they literally. Well, where are they going to get it? They're asking themselves. They can't make the payrolls of their current businesses, probably, or struggling to do so. So, anyway, we'll see what happens. I mid-January. I'm gonna go with mid-January. What about you, Bruce? What's your prediction for the start of the year?
Yeah, I'll go for February 1st and 48 games as a fallback of, lots of precedent. We've had 2 48-game seasons in our past. So that's kind of what I've been thinking all along. And I think this is one mistake that was made in the initial negotiations. What they were steadfast saying, well, next year we're going to start late, but we're going to get the full 82 games in. And this is where they didn't have any proration in their negotiation. It was never in the cards that they were going to play 82 games plus the full playoffs in 2021. It just was never going to happen.
I agree, Bruce. It always seemed like, what are you guys talking about? Like, it's just struck me like you could easily, at the time, I was 99% sure they were going to have the playoffs because they thought, okay, you can get together these teams for a tournament. But at the same time, I was always thinking next year, it always seemed really iffy to me. Like trying to travel around and play all these games, like it just didn't. I could never really figure out how that's going to work in a time of COVID, and again, the challenges that we're seeing in the European leagues are immense. I think it can be done. I think people are getting smart about the virus. So it is obviously there's heavy spread, but I if people take real precautions and there's a lot riding on it for them, including their paycheck, right? Like in the future of their business. I think there does seem to be a motivation to get it right. And I think the NHL probably could pull off a season. Some teams will miss some games. There'll be 5 games will be canceled in a row for some teams. And that's what we're seeing in Europe, right? But I think they're going to be able to pull it off, especially with the vaccine coming in, especially in the United States. The Canadian division is going to be really challenged because COVID is going to be much more, we might, the latest word from Ottawa, I talked to Don Davies, who's an MP, who's on the health committee for the NDP. He was questioning officials last week. The latest word is 6 million doses of the vaccine by the end of March. So that means 3 million Canadians will be vaccinated. But those are all going to be not, I would presume, not NHL players. I mean, we'll see about that.
Essential workers, man.
There'll be doctors and nurses, and there'll be elderly people who get hammered by this disease. There'll be the people in extended care homes, like my parents. I can't wait for them to get vaccinated so they can actually see each other again. So NHL players we'll see if they get early vaccination or not. Like there might be private measures that can be taken for some people who are traveling a lot. Like if you're traveling a lot, maybe there'll be some people who get vaccinated. I don't know. I'm not going to get into who should get it and who shouldn't get it.
Right.
But it looks like Canada could have real trouble getting vaccinated, but I still think they'll probably be able to hold a season if they're super careful.
All we know is that if wherever the front of the line is, Calgary Flames will be in front of that.
And Matthew Kachuk at the very front of that,
Yeah, it's. I
followed by
mean,
Mark
this is
Giordano.
where I mean, the headline of this article was, unless COVID makes it impossible, there will be a season, and that that possibility. I mean, we're talking about daily records for infections, hospitalizations, and deaths, and it's just ramping up and up and up at just a completely
Right.
scary rate. So, the whole shebang could be compromised by what develops there, and it's completely out of Gary Bettman's hands or anyone's. So, some of the stuff is just bigger picture, just dominating what the individual actors are able to do.
In the United States, and who knows what's going to happen, but the people who are heading up Operation Warp Speed say a million, or excuse me, 100 million vaccinations by the end of March in the United States. If they can achieve that, they can easily, I think, proceed with an NHL season. That's going to solve a lot of their problems really, really fast. So good luck to
End
them,
of
man.
March, that's not middle of January. And in the
Yeah,
meantime, you have the mayor of LA saying, shut it all down. So,
there is a lot of
there's going to
uncertainty.
be, yeah.
There's a lot of uncertainty and some really hopeful news. Like I just, if you worked on that vaccine and you're listening to this podcast, good
Well,
work. Good work.
yeah,
Alrighty, Bruce, let's talk about the Canadian division and whether or not, let's not talk anymore about whether or not they can proceed.
right.
We don't know. We don't know. We have our fingers crossed. But the experts say if they do proceed, what do the experts say? The Oilers won't even make the playoffs. Is that the consensus?
Oh,
Or
no, no, not quite. It's Canadian division. It's been a lifelong dream of mine, and I wrote about it on a Hockey Day in Canada on February. And it was like I was George Orr and Ursula Le Guin's The Lathe of Heaven, where the dream became a reality, no matter, but in an unexpected way. And it's become a reality in a most unexpected and unwelcome way that the border is closed and remains closed for the foreseeable future. That there's enough of a critical mass in Canada, thankfully. It's not like baseball or basketball where we got one team and they're forced out of the country to participate. We got seven teams and basically a quarter of the league, and in a four division league, there's enough for just the Canadian teams to make a viable division of their own. So, of course, something we've never seen. I mean, the good news is that there's built in rivalries everywhere, right? Oilers fans, Flames fans, Canucks fans, they not only hate each other, they hate the Leafs and they hate the Habs.
hey, this is a
And
dream come true. This is a dream come true, Bruce.
we've never played a 4-point game against the Leafs ever, and yet the hatred is real, and
Oh, that'll be good, won't it?
and the rivalry. Let's say the rivalry is intense, and the games will be intense, and there will be lots of fun there. Anyways, there was a poll by Pierre Lebrun. Uh, and he talked just to people stateside. So nobody was skin in the game here in Canada, but he talked to executives, front office people, coaches, scouts, so knowledgeable hockey people, and not necessarily large market people, and not necessarily analysts and so on. But they just took a straw poll. How will the Canadian teams finish 1-7? And he got 15 responses, and of those 15, all 15 of them picked Ottawa last.
Yeah.
And otherwise, there was not a consensus, but there was a broader consensus than I would have guessed. Like I would never have thought any one team would get the majority of votes for first place, but in fact, Toronto Maple Leafs got 9 of the 15 votes. Calgary Flames got 4. Montreal Canadiens of all teams got 2, and all the others none, including the Edmonton Oilers. Not one single person of the 15 thought that Edmonton had the best chance to win uh, first place in the Canadian division. And I think
Or Vancouver.
Vancouver, yeah,
Or Winnipeg.
it's a case of being burned too often, maybe by the Oilers of the past. But you know what? I just looked at last year's standings of the 7 Canadian teams. Granted that they weren't all playing each other all season; they had different schedule strengths and stuff, so it's not a perfect thing. And of course, last year isn't next year. But Edmonton Oilers first, best record in the Canadian among all the Canadian teams, most wins, most regulation wins, most points, best points percentage. And then I further broke it down to what happened from the 2020 portion of the schedule. How did they do in the second half of the season when they were building towards the playoffs? And the Oilers were number one with a bullet. They were well ahead of the other Canadian teams. They really expanded their goals for total. They reduced their goals against. They had a huge goal differential in their favor, over zero point 0.6 goals per game, which is, for goal differential, that's like plus 50 on a 82 game season. And they were coming on. And of course, as we know as Oilers fans, New Year's was exactly the time that the team underwent some fundamental changes that were almost entirely for the better. When Dave Tippett moved, split up Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, put them on two separate lines, moved Draisaitl in the middle, moved Nugent Hopkins to the wing, brought in Yamamoto from the minors, put him on the other wing. All of these moves were very beneficial to the Oilers, and they went on a hot run, and they stayed on that hot run. They also got better goaltending after New Year's. Mike Smith was very good in 2021. If you can somehow put August 1st out of your memory, for most of 2021, Mike Smith had good results. Uh, the team, for all that there's knocks about the goaltending, and LeBrun mentioned goaltending and lack of organizational depth, the reasons he thought that these people didn't like Edmonton more than they did. Well, the Oilers, I mean, it's not just goaltending, obviously, team defense, but the Oilers had the second best goals against of all of those seven Canadian teams. Only Winnipeg Jets and their Vezina Trophy winning netminder Connor Hellebuyck had a better defensive record than did the Oilers. So for all that it's seen as their Achilles heel, well, show me where it is in those numbers. I don't see it. Like their defensive record. I mean, you give the team a little bit of credit. You give the coaching some credit. You certainly give the penalty kill a lot of credit. But the goaltenders are part of that, and they're not getting crushed by this so-called Achilles heel unless you focus strictly on that 4 games in August, and that was a duck out of water was the series as a whole. And as I quoted in the post, your stipulation all June and July when we were talking about that series, and you said if they played the series 10 times, the Oilers would win it 7 times, and unfortunate fact is they played it once, and the 30% team came through and won that one series, and they had a few bounces go in their favor for that to happen, but it happened. So the recency bias is that the Oilers couldn't get it done.
Yeah, of course Tippett made an historic coaching error, breaking up the best line in the NHL, and I'm not going to forget that. I know it's often not even mentioned anymore as a reason why the Oilers lost in the playoffs, in the conventional narrative on what went wrong. But man, Bruce, anyway, yeah, I don't. If we're completely honest, right? Like I'll
No, of
take off my
course.
Oiler goggles for a second, my Oilers fan goggles for a second, and I'd have to admit that it's really close. But I think, if I had to bet real money, I think there's two teams to me, Toronto and Edmonton,
Mm-hmm.
who have just a higher tier of talent. And then so how do you surround that talent? And I think Ken Holland has done a fabulous job of bringing in new players. I mean, essentially the Oilers' fourth line last year, Kara, Jason, and Neil. If I was making the lineup, they would be the fifth line. Those guys wouldn't be. So they have a whole other layer of players brought in, who can help them win this year as compared to last year. I mean, let's just real quickly go down the lineup and who's on the team, who's going to be playing on the team right this coming year that wasn't on the team in October last year. Dominic Cahoon wasn't on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Kailer Yamamoto wasn't on the team. Jesse Puljujärvi wasn't on the team. Kyle Turris wasn't on the team. Tyler Ennis wasn't on the team. Those are five guys.
Caleb Jones wasn't on the team.
Those five forward. Caleb Jones wasn't on the team. Tyson Barrie wasn't on the team. And they've lost Oscar Klefbom. So the big question mark to me is how big a drop is Caleb Jones to Klefbom, and how big is that made up for the improvement of Tyson Barrie over Matt Benning. So I actually think Tyson Benning over Matt Benning is pretty huge. And the Caleb Jones, Oscar Klefbom thing, I'm gonna say it's surprisingly gonna be not as big an issue as some people might think. I think Caleb Jones is overripe and ready to step in and hang in there in a top 4 role in the NHL. And that's a big statement. And if he doesn't, they still have Chris Russell on the left side, and he'll get you through. They have Lundstrom they can go to. They have Lagesson. So it's not exactly like they have no options on the left side. Their goaltending, Bruce, is to me more settled this year than it was last year. Last year, Koskinen was a total question mark whether he could be a number one goalie in the NHL. Well, he was a number one goalie in the NHL last year. He had a weak playoffs, but he had a 916 save percentage. Like, he was in the top half of starters in the NHL, just at the top half. He was like 15, 16, 17, right in that middle range. So the Oilers have a starting goalie that who played that way for a whole year. Can he keep it up? Well, I don't see why not. He got better year to year. Unless he gets hurt, it should be okay. So I all due respect to the experts, that kind of unanimity, like Toronto's a good team, but they don't have 2 MVPs at center. Montreal, who are their 2 top centers? Who are they counting on? They're
2
counting
young kids, Suzuki and Kotkaniemi.
And you're going to have them go up against, listen, Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. There's something fundamentally changed this year, Bruce.
No kidding.
Draisaitl and McDavid are playing on their own lines, and they're actually both going to have good wingers. They're actually both going to be surrounded by good wingers. That transformed the team last January. That's the big change. One of these years, Bruce, the Oilers are going to go on a run where they start the year and they're going to get like 13 wins and 2 or 3 losses. And I'm not saying that's this year, but it's not a bad bet that it could be this year. The Oilers could come charging out, take command, and be the best team. Is that going to happen? I'd say there's a 1 in 3 chance that's going to happen. But there is a what is there in terms of the Oilers winning this thing? I'd say it's 40%. They're going to win.
Well, it's not 0. That's the thing that shocked me, and it kind of prompted me to write this post. I mean, Toronto, 14 out of the 15 had them in the top 3, whereas Edmonton, it was like 3 for second, 4 for third, 3 for fourth, 3 for fifth, 2 for sixth, and none at either first or seventh. And they're just in the middle of the pack. And as a weighted average, Oilers 4th. So in the playoffs, assuming a 4-team playoff, because they're talking about having the first 2 rounds of the playoffs also strictly in Canada, so that would just mean 4 teams in. So, and it's going to be a brawl because really, I mean, there's no superpower team in there, but there's other than Ottawa, and I think Ottawa is closer than they appear. The other teams, there's going to be a lot of highly competitive games. Let's put it that way. And, the teams shown on the outside looking in, Vancouver and Winnipeg, no doubt their fans are saying, hey, we're better than that. And so I'm just saying, we're better than that. Oilers have got, and you mentioned it, I mean, lack of organizational depth. I mean, even if you can make that case, well, let's look at the top of the lineup. And which other team in the 7 or the 30 other teams in the league have 2 top-end players of the caliber of McDavid and Draisaitl? Well, the scoring race tells me there's none other teams that have that. And there's more to hockey than scoring, obviously, but it was Edmonton's surge in scoring that really pushed their performance in the second half last season. I don't see why that's going to slow down.
Edmonton, compared to a lot of the American teams, what the Oilers lack compared to a lot of teams is that true number 1 D-man, or that really elite player. How many of the Canadian teams have a true number 1 D-man? I'd say Quinn Hughes in Vancouver is that guy. He's that guy.
Out.
Mark Giordano obviously was that guy. I think his play took a little bit of a hit last year. He's 37 now. Montreal's top guy, top two guys are Shea Weber, who is now 35, and Jeff Petrie, who's 32. Jeff Petrie's never been a true number 1 guy. He's comparable to a Darnell Nurse. So they don't really and Ottawa doesn't have that player. Maybe Thomas Chabot will grow into that. And Morgan Riley's Morgan Riley's a very good hockey player. When Connor McDavid isn't deking him, and burned, and
he got burned.
He got burned, and but Toronto's depth. Here's their defensive depth: Jake Muzzin, who's 31 now, and he's a good player. He's a top 4 NHL D man.
Mm-hmm.
TJ Brody, he's 30, and he's probably a top 4 NHL D man.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Hall, Zach Bogosian, Rasmus Sandy, Travis Dermott, Mikko Leighton, and their bottom of their defensive roster is very similar to the Oilers, and their top isn't that dissimilar. Morgan Riley's the best defenseman probably of the whole group. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah.
Oilers, you'd probably trade him for any Oilers defenseman. Is that fair? Yeah, probably.
Look hard for sure.
Yeah, would you trade him for Darnell Nurse? Some people might not, right? Some people might not. But I think most would. But the Leafs aren't that stacked on defense. And to me, it comes down to who's going to be unlucky to have some of their top 4 D-men get hurt. How many teams are going to be unlucky to have their top 4 D-men get hurt? And when that happens, who do they have to fill in? How many guys can you plug in who can still get the job done? And that's what the season's going to come down to, unless there's a goalie injury, which that's a little bit more rare, but can happen as well. But if the Oilers stay healthy, if their top D-men stay healthy, I like the Oilers' ability to withstand a little bit more injury on the blue line than in the past, Bruce. I mean, they have players like Lagesson, Lundstrom, Bouchard in the 7 D-man role, and they have Russell and arguably Tyson Barrie as their third pairing. Both guys capable of moving up into the top 4. I mean, Barrie may start with Darnell Nurse. We'll see what we have. Maybe we'll have Ethan Bear and Caleb Jones, which would be kind of the old Bakersfield connection getting together. And I'd like to see those guys. Yeah. All righty, Bruce. Let's go to, this is related. This is the NHL.com projected the Oilers lines. And I don't know where they got the information from, but they got one thing right. They got the dynamite line together. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Leon Draisaitl, and Kailer Yamamoto. And it will be very interesting to see what Tippett does after the heat. Fair amount of heat, actually. He took. I'm sure he heard about that decision, and whether he will keep that line together or not. Now, the NHL.com lines, Bruce, for some reason didn't even have Dominic Cahoon on their list as one of on any of the top 4 lines. They didn't have Dominic Cahoon. Dominic Cahoon, at even strength, he scored 2.2 points per game for the last 2 years, and even higher in the last year. Just a little bit below Taylor Hall for even strength scoring the last 2 years, and ahead of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. He will be in the Oilers' starting lineup. He's a very good hockey player. The NHL.com has James Neal, Connor McDavid, and Zach Kassian projected on the top line. And when you look at who had success with Connor McDavid last year, James Neal is at the absolute bottom of the list, even strength. They had a goals for percentage of like 40% with James Neal and Connor McDavid, which is terrible. You can't have when Connor McDavid's on the ice, your goals for percentage has to be 55, 60%. That's what you'd expect at even strength. And there was some pretty clear evidence that the McDavid-Neal combo didn't work. 11 goals for, 16 goals against when they were on the ice at even strength. That didn't work. And I don't think we're going to see it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's what Tippett has in mind. But when you have Dominic Cahoon, like we've talked in the past about how difficult it is to play with Connor McDavid, at least I have. It's one of my constant drums that I beat because he needs the puck. You want him to have the puck. But then there's this weird thing where when the other guy on the line has the puck, he's got to be able to make a really good play with the puck. He's got to be this highly skilled player as well. Usually when you have a highly skilled player, he wants to carry the puck and do something with it, like Nugent Hopkins. I think Nugent Hopkins is a bit of a waste when he's with McDavid because really you want the guys with the McDavid to play off of him constantly. It's a really hard thing to do, but I think Dominic Cahoon could do that. He doesn't need the puck. He's good with the puck. And I think the other guy, Zach Kassian, showed that he can get by. Zach Kassian's goals for percentage with McDavid was 52%. 54 goals for and 42 against. And they were together through that horrible, horrible, ghastly, wretched period in December where McDavid and Draisaitl couldn't get it together covering the defensive slot. And there was just tons and tons of the worst, most dangerous grade A chances against the Oilers. So I think Kassian, Cahoon, and McDavid will be my top line. So Bruce, what did you think of the Neil suggestion?
Well, that I think it's sort of boilerplate, frankly. You go back and say, well, they got that hole on top six and they've got this guy that's got a long history of scoring goals, and he scored 19 last year, and he wasn't 100% for a chunk of the year. So let's slot him in there. I mean, to me, Neil, I think the last 2 years has shown that the top six is maybe a little bit, I won't say above his pay grade, but a little beyond his capacity. And I'm not saying he couldn't keep it for short times, the same way you move a defenseman into the top four. He's a guy you can certainly put up there for a part of a game or a week or whatever. I just don't see him maintaining long term. The list they have here, I mean, they do have the dynamite line together. They do have the third line that we've been talking about quite a bit, Turris between Ennis and Puljujarvi listed together.
Yeah.
Not shown here at all are the three European guys, Cahoon, Haas, and Nygaard, who are all on the cusp certainly of the roster. But I mean, you can make a case for a couple of them being on the fifth line. I mean, Haas versus Kara, 4C. Some prefer Haas. Kara had the special teams aspect, and I think that was really the difference maker last spring. The line that you didn't particularly like at even strength, and I didn't like them at even strength of Kara, Neil, and Chason, but all of them were monsters on their various special team roles last year. So that that's still going to be a factor.
I like that line at even strength. Actually, in the playoffs, they were a good line. I don't mind that line at even strength. Go ahead.
Sorry, and I think Cahoon is sort of the favorite to be in the top six, whether it's with Leon or with Connor. I mean, I'm sure he'll get a chance to see how he fits with both. But he was, to me, he was an inspired addition in the sense that when you have two star centers and one star left winger, you're going to have one of the centers is maybe going to have his nose out of joint a little bit. No matter, how much he sucks it up and takes it for the team, he's going to say, well, I mean, I'm sure Connor's saying, well, look, Leon got those two great wingers. I could kill it on a line like that too. Well, with a guy like Cahoon, you can put him with Draisaitl, and Draisaitl is I don't think he's going to be unhappy that Nuge is on a different line, because he knows this guy. They played together for years. In fact, they played full years together as kids, and they've been regulars on the German national team for years. He can score, he can play. He's not just a guy from Germany. He's a guy who can play the game, put the puck in the net. And so ultimately, that's the combination I expect to see. But we'll see. Time will tell.
It's true, and we've heard little rumors about that it was Draisaitl who was driving the "I want to play with Connor McDavid" thing. That he was unhappy when he was not. Someone said that on Oilers Now. One of the I think it might have been John Shannon or someone like, or Speck. I can't remember, but someone let that slip. That it was actually Draisaitl, and that we've also heard that it's Draisaitl. Who he cares about playing with most is Yamamoto. And we might see, if it's Cahoon, Draisaitl, and Yamamoto, that will also be a pretty dynamite line, I have a feeling. So that will like this, my criticism, my ongoing ranting about that might be assuaged by a line that works. That's all I need to see is a line that works. I'm not wedded to Nugent Hopkins on that line. Nuge with McDavid can work. Nuge, McDavid, and Kassian could work. And obviously you have two really fantastic players like that. But I think actually Cahoon is a better fit than Nugent Hopkins. Just they're two different skill sets. I think Cahoon just strikes me as a very confident player with the puck. And so when you have to have confidence playing with McDavid too, because there's that need to give up the puck, but there is a need to make a play now and then when you have it. And I just think that could work. I think he's a really, really smart player. And I just love the drive on it. Honestly, I love the Dynamite line so much. They had such chemistry. We've got to see it, man. We've got to see. They got to can never get enough of the Dynamite line.
Well, Leon Draisaitl, for all the complaining about his plus minus, from January 1st to the end of the season, he was plus 13.
There you go.
And that included
and playing center
playing center,
driving his own line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Bruce, you got those two lines, and then you have, you know what? If things go bad, let's say things go bad on those, guess who you can plug in? Guess who you can give a chance to? Tyler Ennis, who had 1.8 points per game per 60 over the last 2 years, which is the same as Tyler Toffoli, the big Montreal signing, which is ahead of Josh Anderson, the other big Montreal signing. So, and then you have Jesse Puljujärvi, who's chomping at the bit. So there's suddenly from having like really limited options, and there's also James Neal and Josh Archibald and Alex Chason, who the coach likes to plug in there at various times, and I wouldn't go with any of those guys. And there's Joakim Nygard, who actually, when Nygard was on the ice with McDavid last year, they scored 6 goals and allowed 2 against. So there's all kinds of options. The Oilers' forward depth suddenly has gone from like a huge negative on the team to a positive. So players like Neal and Chason, one of them will be in the lineup, but it's probably just going to be one of them each game. I have a feeling. Jujhar Khaira is tough to get playing time. I would go with Haas over him at the start of the year, and if Haas can kill penalties, then that battle is over. Nygard's going to be tough to get playing time, unless there's an injury, and there's always an injury. So we'll see what happens then. But the Oilers have they're 5 lines deep with NHL hockey players, Bruce. And when was the last time the Oilers were 5 lines deep with the NHL hockey players? 1980s, maybe? Did they have that kind of depth then? This is a pretty. It was a different league that it was a little. I think I can't remember who they like the players they would have plugged it, like Norm Lacombe, I guess, like who was on the bench. Anyway, it was a long time ago. If they ever had that kind of depth, they've got pretty good depth now. Let's finish off, Bruce, with a brief discussion of Jesse Puljujärvi. And Mark Spector let slip or reported one of the most encouraging comments that I've heard about Jesse Puljujärvi in years. Spector was quoting something that Ken Holland had told him kind of off the record in the past, but was on the record now. What did Ken Holland say to Spector?
I don't have it right in front of me, but refresh me. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Were you thinking about something else?
Well, I didn't have that specific comment in my head.
What he said was, essentially what Holland said was, because you wrote on it, I was going to give you.
I did.
I was throwing that to you. But what he said was, now I've got to think of it, was that what he hoped was to get a veteran center to play with Puljujärvi for the whole year. Get this veteran center in there. Someone who could teach Jesse the game and kind of keep them together the whole year. And that was the plan for the year. Get him with a veteran center, third line center, teach him the game, and that's what's going to work out. And lo and behold, the Oilers had that player in the past in Dylan Strome, and they traded him away for Ryan Spooner. And that is just a world of hurt. Let's not get into it. But they've signed Kyle Turris, who is a Dylan Strome-like player, I think. Veterans. Yeah, Ryan Strome, Dylan Strome. I always mix them up. Ryan Strome-like player. And Kyle Turris is this veteran center who's had some real success in the past. And he's not that old that you're worried. He's, what is he, 31? 30, 31? Yeah. So he's not 33, 34 like Eric Belanger was when he came. He's a little younger than that. Hopefully he can play in this role and be this guy for Jesse Puljujärvi. And Speck was also complaining about Puljujärvi's lack of scoring in the Finnish league. Bruce, what I've seen is Puljujärvi could easily have 4 or 5, 6 more points in the Finnish league. He's in on usually 4 or 5 grade A chances a game. Usually, there's been a couple games maybe where he hasn't, but 6 grade A chances sometimes. He could easily have more points. Is what I'm
Oh
saying.
yeah.
So just to rate him on points, I think was a little bit iffy on Spector's part there. I mean, it'd be nice if he had more points, but I'm not worried about it.
16 games worth of points at that.
Yeah,
I
it's a
mean,
small sample size.
it was about that many number of points that of games with a low sample size that prompted Peter Chiarelli to trade Ryan Strome, just to go back to Puljujärvi's previous mentor.
Yeah.
Uh, that's a trade that still sticks in my craw, but we'll just leave it there. But that's exactly the player uh, that Ken Holland was describing. Just saying he wants Puljujärvi on the third line next to a veteran center, and him on the bench, give him a steady presence, and I'd like him to play with the same guy for most of the season. And that, to me, that is the recipe for Jesse Puljujärvi. This idea that he's somehow just going to get airlifted in onto Connor McDavid's line, or worse, this interpretation of some people, any aspirational comment made by Puljujärvi or anybody talking about Puljujärvi that foresees him in such a role down the line is somehow entitlement of a spoiled brat that doesn't know any better. That kind of stuff gets me going. Uh, his long-term future remains indeterminate. The short-term future, it sounds like Ken Holland has a very clear idea in mind, and I think it's a very logical and sensible way to approach this player. Establish him on the team in a regular role in the NHL, and then take it from there.
Yeah, and that's what watching him in Finland, I think he needs. Like, I don't actually watching him in Finland. I'm not thinking there's an easy fit here with McDavid. I think McDavid is hard to play with, and there's a better fit with Draisaitl, I think. But if Draisaitl's got his heart set on Yamamoto, I don't know if that'll go over that well. So I'm there's all these internal team politics which we can only speculate on based on comments that we hear from insiders, which I may or may not be interpreting correctly. But third line with Puljujärvi, that's exactly the right fit. Like 40 games, just sending him out there every shift, and like second power play unit with Turris, maybe second power play unit, and killing penalties. I think
Maybe.
yes, that Puljujärvi should kill penalties in the NHL, and would do a heck of a job because one of the issues has been you get these some games descend into power play PK time for the Oilers, and a guy can not be on the ice for 10, 15 minutes
Right.
sitting there. I think that's really hurt Puljujärvi in the past. So get him out there on the PK. Great big guy, huge wingspan, a good defensive hockey player, I think. And give him that role with Turris. Have those guys out there and see what they can do in that role every single game. And I think it'll work. I think there's a good hockey player there.
Well, he's sure skating well in the games that I've watched, and he just kind of swoops around out there, eh? Like reminds me of Wayne Swoop Carlton, the
Yeah,
Boston Bruins, and,
yeah,
that was a little bit of that nickname was kind of a double-edged sword, but yes, it's not a floater. Like swooping is actually a skill that he just sort of bends and he's going in a different direction and he's all over that puck and he's got some good speed and this huge wingspan and he's once he gets to the point where he's consistently keyword applying these natural gifts of his in the NHL. I mean, there's NHL plus talent there for sure.
Swoop Carlton, 22 goals in 69 games for the Boston Bruins in 70-71, which was a pretty good team.
That was the year they had the 10-20 goal scorers, was it?
Is that right?
There was one year they had 10 20 goal scorers.
Then he must have got picked up by California Golden Seals either in a trade or the expansion draft. I'm not sure which. And then he played in the WHA and the WHA, which was kind of like AHL caliber at that time. I think it's fair to say he was a killer goal scorer yeah, that's a good comparison. They have a very similar, at the upper end of that level, Frank Mahovlich, that kind of swooping style of play. Swoop Carlton being kind of maybe at the lower end for someone in that category.
Or the nickname that
Yeah.
reminds me in his case, but that's a word that describes Jesse Puljujärvi's style to my mind.
Yeah, I'm not sure that in the end that Puljujärvi will have that really super duper high end skill to be a top line NHL player. His shooting looks good, but it's not great. Like it doesn't, like he's not killer. Like you were watching some highlights of that new kid the Oilers drafted, Carter Savoy. With that, now who knows if that will translate? But the killer shot. He was said by some
A shot will translate. Whoa.
Second best shot in the draft, according to I think it was Scott Wheeler, if I'm not mistaken, of The Athletic, and Alexander Holtz he had rated higher than that. So, and I think I'm getting that right. Fact check me on that, but. The passing is really good. It's certainly NHL quality passing, maybe top 6, but I don't know if Puljujärvi is going to be a top line NHL player from watching him in Finland. But doesn't matter. There's an NHL player there, a good one, and can't wait to see him over here. And right now, the whole Finnish league is out until Boxing Day due to COVID. Yep. So. I wonder if he's going to come over sooner than later. He may be coming over in a couple of weeks, and he should come over here, start playing with his teammates again. I'm sure the Oilers players will start to get together in December.
They're already some of them together.
Yeah, come on over, man. If that's allowed, I don't know what the flight rules are now, but I think he could come over. They're bringing over, just hop a ride with the Finnish national junior team as they come over here for the U20 tournament. That's probably not allowed though.
Well, Draisaitl's here apparently among others, Nurse and so on. Some of these guys are working out together, and it wouldn't hurt, I think, Jesse to hang out with those guys a little bit and sort of get in the team. And I think that was part of his problem before. So with the league being postponed the way it is, you bring up an interesting point that maybe that hastens his departure point. I know the team, Karpat, is already preparing for his departure because they brought in some 35-year-old journeyman, stuck him in Jesse's role on the first line. And so they are not expecting to have him much longer. And with, games canceled for 3+ weeks. I mean, initially Karpat was the team, Udu Karpat, that canceled 6 home games in December. And I think that was sort of the movement that made the whole league sort of reevaluate and say, maybe we just better shut her all down for a while we got through the worst of this crisis.
It's interesting because, when I don't know what the rules are in terms of the players getting together right now inside to play hockey in Edmonton. Like they're
plus 10.
I don't even know what the rules are, Bruce. Like I have no idea what will govern that, if they can be in a cohort, like a work cohort. It's a little different because they're professionals. This is their job, and I think, but I mean, like socially, he probably couldn't get together with them because we ain't allowed to do that in Alberta right now. So that's the rules, and let's stick to the rules as best we can. I mean, you can get together on an outdoor rink, I think, if there's less than 10. Yeah.
I passed a couple of outdoor rinks this week. There was at least 10 people out there that I saw, and I'll leave it right there. But there was at least 10.
Yeah. I mean, outdoor transmission I think the science tells us that even when they had these huge protests in the States and huge rallies, outdoor things, that this, I don't put it this way, on the top of the things that I worry about with COVID, that's way down my list, because I think the science tells us that hasn't been a big issue. And if you can, again, fact check me on that, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's what the science has told us, that, there's always, whenever there's a rally, like one political group or the other side's always attacking them, like, you shouldn't do that. And then then they hold their own rally. Well, this is really important that we hold our rally, and it's relatively safe. So, but I do think that the science backs up those who will argue that the outdoor stuff is relatively safe. So, yeah, it's all relative. And let's leave it there, Bruce. Thanks for talking today.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast. Let me just find the off button here.